network. And I'll first ask if there are any announcements. Any of you having some cool things going on?
Jim's got his hand up there.
Oh, okay, Jim?
Yes, hi, Tamara. Thank you, and Patrick, and everyone. Let's see, in the place where sometimes climate change gets shunted off to the side, and sometimes climate change education gets shunted right to the middle. Whenever NASA has an event in California that is meant to be hands-on, especially if people have to pay for it, where it's to be popular, they call us in. And it can be about climate change, but they know that we can tie into what's happening. So that's going to happen again in a couple of weeks at Chabot Space and Science Center. It's NASA Fest, and we're tying into wildfires, into climate change, of course, James Webb Space Telescope, all this type of thing. But it's a thing. I think it's just an example of climate change can be one of the most popular forms of education. People can love it. We get a reputation that I don't think is earned, is that we're gloomy, we're dull, we lecture, we're boring, and that's not true. And I think we need to get that out. And I'm glad to work with other colleagues, Rachel, Seth, many here, Danelle. Everybody here knows how to make things interesting that students love to learn. So I just think we need to toot our own horn on that, or jointly toot our own horn on that one from time to time. Thank you.
Okay. So, Seth?
Hi, everybody. It's been a little while since I've joined one of the CLEAN calls, but Seth Spencer with Climate Generation. I'll just put a plug in for our 19th annual Summer Institute for Climate Change Education, 3-day virtual institute in July, and I'll just put a link in the chat. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I think I see here that Deb, you actually said you wanted to hear people's reactions to the new Mexican president. So you want to just sort of comment on that, start the conversation?
Oh, well, sure. It's more from a positive psychology viewpoint of celebrating the wins. And Jewish female president is great, but the fact that she studied climate science, she seems to have a handle on clean energy and root causes. I haven't studied her much, but I just started hearing about it a few days ago. So I would hoping for hope that other people
Yes. Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. I actually hadn't heard anything about it until she got elected. But the fact that a scientist, let alone a woman Jewish scientist, got elected president is pretty impressive. Scott?
Well, just a comment. I mean, I had heard a little bit about this before she actually had gotten elected, but I saw a remark today to anybody who gets the newsletter Heated by Emily. I forgot her last name, but anyway, it was pretty negative about her possibilities because she's already apparently approved, not now since she's been president, but already gotten involved in some fossil fuel stuff, unfortunately, that paved the way for a pipeline and did some other things, a refinery, that seems to indicate that maybe she won't be such a great asset on this subject. But I don't know. People may have other ideas or thoughts.
I don't know. I've also heard things that she was basically hand selected by the previous president, and questions about whether she'd actually be independent or a puppet. So I actually don't know. I know nothing about her other than what I've said so far.
But I like the idea of what Deb was saying, hoping for hope. It seems to be at least a step in a different direction. Whether it's better or it remains to be seen, I suppose. But it definitely seems hopeful.
Great. Well, thanks for bringing that up, Deb. So I do want to let's just take a pause here and say anybody who is new to the call, and I've not been on recently, so I'm not actually sure who is new, would like to introduce themselves to the group. And those of you that have been around for a while, you might want to put in the chat who you are so that the new people can kind of learn. So anybody here is new or has not been here very much?
Hi, Goss.
There we are. Kos, have we, I don't know if I've met you before. I'm sorry. Please say again.
Oh no, my name is Cass Miller. I am with Our Climate, Our Future. I work with Rabbit Action for the Climate Emergency. And I'm excited to be here as my first call. I'm not sure how familiar y'all are with Our Climate, Our Future Action for the Climate Emergency, but we create educator resources. And I'm excited
Sounds
to.
familiar. I'm just not, I can't really place where I know it from, but
I'll go ahead and post a link in the chat.
okay, great. Anybody else want to introduce themselves, or you can bring up a topic? We don't have a presentation today. We're kind of into the summer. If anybody has anything that a specific topic they'd like to talk about and explore more.
We do have a planned conversation, actually.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually did look online and I didn't see anything on the schedule past May, so I wasn't aware.
Sure. Yeah, Gina and Katie are both out, so it's not as updated as we would like it to be, but we hope that Katie is enjoying her time with her new baby and Gina is enjoying her honeymoon in Europe. And I'll be doing a little overview on our work on the NCA 5 today.
Oh, that's
to
great.
Give an update on where that's at and what's on the pipeline there. And then that'll probably take maybe 20 minutes or so. So we can open it up to conversations on that topic or others afterward.
Okay, so one question, when did Katie have her baby and did she have a boy or girl?
Oh, let's see, when about it was the first week of June or May. So I think we're about a month out
Okay.
there. And she had a boy.
Very nice. Okay, thanks. Thanks for that update. So why don't you go ahead and talk about NCA 5?
Sure. And yeah, thanks everybody for throwing your info in the chat there. And Cass, great to have you join us. So let's see, I'll share my screen and provide a little bit of background. Okay. So since the third National Climate Assessment, we have been creating a supplemental educator's guide to go along with those materials so teachers can more easily bring that into their classrooms. That's taken different forms and we're refining as we go, but we got cranking pretty quickly after the NCA 5 was published last winter, and I should have everything up online tomorrow. If not, by the end of the day today, we will see. But to give you a feel for where to find it, I know that even those of us who have experience with the CLEAN website sometimes get lost in the layers. And for Cass, if you go to CLEAN, there are 3 parts here. There's the collection, which has about 1,000 resources that have been heavily vetted through our review process and notated to help teachers bring those into the classroom. There's our teaching climate and energy section, which provides teaching guidance on a bunch of different topics, and the get involved section, which will take you to recordings of these calls, including this one shortly, and workshops, professional development, and a way to get into our listserv. And actually, I'm seeing that I just had an email from someone who couldn't get into this call, so I'm going to provide them the link very quickly here. Apologies for this momentary interruption in our programming. Tamara, were you part of the NCA 3 and 4 work?
Yeah, mostly the NCA 3. So I helped develop the materials for the New England region.
Awesome. Maybe you could touch briefly while I get this email out on what that process involved, and I can talk about.
Okay, so I'll remember back. So what we did is we looked through that particular section of the New England region. I live in Massachusetts. And I tried to identify the major climate change impacts in that area, and then identified resources in the CLEAN collection that that could help teachers address those impacts with their students. And so we put together those stories. It was basically resources from the CLEAN collection that could help teachers address the climate change impacts for their region. And this is sort of along the lines of other work that I am doing. So one of the things, my background is as a climate scientist and then a climate science educator. And I began to realize as we were developing curriculum materials that you need to really develop materials that are relevant to the individual teachers. And that is different in Florida and Colorado and Maine and New Hampshire and Texas. So trying to customize it. And that's what we did when we were putting together those resources for the NCA 3.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and if you get into the teaching climate and energy section, which provides that teaching guidance, by the way, we're going to update this page so that it's more user-friendly, because right now we have this teaching climate and energy section and then this tools for educator section. And when you get in the tools, it has really awesome stuff like our climate and mental health pages and managing controversy in the classroom and our NCA support pages. So again, that's in the teaching climate and energy section, tools for educators, scrolling down, and NCA resources. So we have the NCA 2014 down there, which was NCA 3. What you see if you go to this right now is NCA 4. And what I'll have posted in the next 24 hours or so is the NCA 5. For NCA 4 and NCA 5, things were divided into 10 regions, which, as Tamara was mentioning, helps us to really get specific on the resources we're providing that connect with the issues in the specific regions. So this is a really cool process because our collection is in general very nationally focused, and this helps us zoom in quite a bit. So looking at the NCA 4, if you click on a region here, it includes a lot of text, most of which is from the NCA itself. And then in the key messages, it gets into a set of guiding questions, followed by a few key figures, related chapters, lesson plans from CLEAN, and then climate resiliency toolkit case studies. We've reorganized this quite a bit for the NCA 5. If you take a look, this is a development version of this chapter, and we have streamlined it so that we include the art by climate selections from the new NCA, which is a really cool section. And then for the key messages, instead of having the different sections of the guiding questions and then the figures, resources, and things, we have the guiding questions and then lessons and videos that address that guiding question directly. And the figures we've incorporated into the chapter itself. For each of the guiding questions, which cover quite a bit, we have the lesson and video not to like completely answer the question, but really to show how you could go about working through that question. Each of the key messages generally come with 3 guiding questions. There's a few with 4, but I don't think there's any with less, because these cover so much ground. We couldn't really get less than 3 to actually attempt to address them. So a little bit more streamlined, which we're constantly working to get down to a level that's really effective. And this is one of my very favorite new sections. I think that a lot of us are really seeing this switch from a focus on climate science to a focus on pathways to action. Really specifically not calling them solutions, but providing pathways at a classroom level for students and teachers to get involved. And what I was seeing when I was really surveying the landscape was that there's a lot of stuff on the community levels, and there's a lot of stuff on the individual action levels, but there's not a whole lot of resources that are specifically scaled to the classroom level. So the way that we worked on that was to include an overall solution, often but not always from drawdown, and kind of the big zoomed out, then a regional case study from the Climate Resiliency Toolkit, and then a classroom level action to engage in that action space. After we put it all together, we had about 50 classroom level climate actions. So separately, we're going to produce the classroom level climate action guide, which I am really excited about. I think it's going to be a fun addition to the climate education space. And specifically what we noticed in the National Climate Assessment work, the NCA is really focused on hazards. And hazards are such an interesting gateway into climate change topics and education, because they kind of sidestep the polarization in many cases. You know, even in a polarized community, there's very few, I don't think there's anybody, but I won't say no one because you never know. But generally people aren't like, we shouldn't address floods, we shouldn't address fires. You can generally find pathways into those conversations and actions through the hazards. And that was a big part of the NCA. So a section of our guide here pulls out all the individual hazards and has classroom level actions for those hazards. For the hazard section, we didn't include the same level that we did for the regional actions with the case studies. We boiled it down to the actions themselves. But we've got fire, flood, drought, extreme heat, and then we have actions for students to engage in policy, classroom level actions to support TEK and Indigenous voices, and a section on classroom level actions for green energy, food systems, and other topics, which didn't quite fall into one of those other sections. So I'm really excited about the new NCA 5 Educators Guide, but I'm equally excited about the classroom level climate action guide that will accompany it. And because this is very connected to the NCA 5, I just wanted to highlight a couple things here too before I open it up. When we're talking about this educator's guide, we're specifically talking about the regional chapters. And I wanted to highlight that there's also topical chapters. And this section, really awesome adaptation and mitigation sections, which I think if an educator can dig into, is very possible to bring into the classroom in more detail and connect that to our classroom level climate actions. Another few sections that are really cool in this new National Climate Assessment, the Art by Climate section. There are pieces featured in every chapter, but you can also scroll through this and see this project as a whole. I think what's really interesting about this project is like Xavier Cortada is a nationally and internationally renowned artist. He does amazing work on sea level rise that's very simple and specific, but really impactful. This shows the 7 is, that means that this area is 7 feet above sea level. So really amazing work. But there right next to him is a youth entry 10th grade piece that I think is also really powerful. So this whole section includes all levels of artists. And I think it really speaks to the recognition that to address climate change, we need the science, but we need to also include ways to connect to the emotional and the creative aspects in order to get that systems approach. Danelle, I was excited to see your comment in the chat earlier about the workshop you're hosting later this summer. But that systems approach really needs to include more than just the science. And this is a nod to that from the National Climate Assessment. So very cool section here. Another section I wanted to highlight for y'all is this National Climate Assessment Atlas. What's awesome about the Atlas is you can get really zoomed in through the climate maps. You can get down to kind of the sub-county level. I'm not going to dig too deep here, but I really encourage you to explore these tools because I think one of the challenges that we've had as educators and communicators around climate change is this lack of local and regional focus. And hopefully between the Atlas and the regional specificity of the report, along with the educator's guide here, you'll have a lot of tools to engage. And I think they're going to do the art and climate section again for the next one. So be on the lookout for that to engage with your students. Okay, that was a lot of stuff.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. That is a lot of stuff. Rachel?
Thank you, Patrick, for sharing all of that. You know, I was investigating or digging into the website a little bit more while you were talking, and something that at least Florida educators are incredibly concerned about is standards and being able to relate standards to any kind of curriculum or lesson that's introduced into the classroom. And Florida particularly is really tightened down in general on what kinds of lessons that can be introduced into a classroom. And I'm not saying that they're the only ones, but maybe I feel like it's a little harder to dig to find out how a lesson from CLEAN relates to a particular standard, even if it's just an NGSS, because a lot of the NGSS standards we can relate to, you know, state standards. And we can match them. But I just wondered, I guess, have you thought about having some kind of, because I did a search and it just kind of mentions NGSS, but it's hard for a teacher to find that. Am I missing something? I guess an example where it's actually quite easy. Let me show you something that I know some teachers have accessed is through NASA's Climate Kids science standards, and it goes through you know, different parts of weather and climate and things. Anyway, I'm just wondering, is there an easier way that CLEAN can present it or each of your lessons? I guess, I don't know, am I getting across? I hope.
Yeah, I do want to make sure everyone knows that all of the CLEAN lessons include standards, and generally the NGSS standards, though we have expanded that a bit with our teaching across the curriculum work. But specifically what I popped up on the screen there briefly, this create NGSS CLEAN units section will take you beyond the lesson level to create full aligned units. But if you go into the Explore the Collection, you can sort by any of the NGSS disciplinary core performance expectation, cross-cutting concepts, everything is tagged to match up there. So it's one of the challenges of CLEAN that we do so many different types of tagging and look at so many different angles of a resource that I think that sometimes different users don't necessarily know that these are all aligned already.
Right.
And
And,
search
and Patrick, go to one of the particular ones to show what the actual record looks like and where see the next generation science, the ones that are listed right there at the top. So if you, right under the description, if you click that, it'll show you, yeah, click that.
I guess I mean, I don't doubt that you do, and I know you do. It's just that, like, if I were a teacher looking from the outside in, it's super difficult on the CLEAN website to navigate and try to find a lesson if I want to target a certain standard. Does that make sense? And I know a lot of teachers, that's kind of, they're almost forced to do that, and they need something that's not complicated, that can be quickly accessed. That's all.
Yeah, if you go to that list that Patrick showed with the whole list of resources, and then on the right side, those boxes, you can click on the particular standard and find the resources that address that standard. If you want to go in that direction, that's a way to search the collection for materials that address a particular standard or a subcomponent of that standard.
Yeah, I guess my question, Rachel, would be, we've tagged them for the standards. You can search by the standards. You can search any level of NGSS standard type and grade level. What would make it easier beyond that?
I mean, I will support what Rachel's talking about because we work with teachers a lot, and Arizona is politically unique, as many of you know, but probably don't really appreciate if you don't live here. But you know, any state that has NGSS like standards, like we do have like cross-reference them generally with NGSS. But I think what she's trying to say is teachers are looking specifically to teach a standard. They're not looking for a fancy title or some like they're going to come in, and quite honestly, what they want to see is like, that's the first thing I want to see, is just be able to click on the standard and then see all the lessons that would help me teach that. Like, they are forced to do that in many ways because of the constraints on their time and efforts and the way they have to justify what they're doing. So I 100% agree. Like, teachers are not just spending their time, some are, but not most, like just looking through lists of phenomenal lessons. They are very specifically after lessons that apply to a very specific standard that they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the best landing page for an educator, is like, here they are, the NGSS standards, just click on one and you can immediately find exactly lessons that apply to what you're trying to teach.
So it sounds like more of a challenge of organization than more work, because we have that exact thing in our tags where you can click on a standard and get to all the applicable lessons at the applicable grade level.
Yeah,
So
it's how many clicks do you have to get to that like collection?
One. Yeah,
but
it's just
obvious. That's not true.
And is that obvious? That's
It's
the
not
problem. It's
Mhm.
not obvious at all. It's not intuitive either, is the problem. Because I sat here and tried to do it myself, and it took a lot of researching, and I didn't even find some of the pages. I mean, granted, there's so much information here, and so I understand the challenge, but like, just from a perspective of a teacher, like Janelle was saying, thank you.
I'm definitely with you. Usability is a challenge to our site, and we're working with CERC to reorganize things in a way that helps address that challenge. Because it's
So
not
Patrick,
just,
do you think that if so at this top, I'm just at right now that when you get onto the CLEAN page, it says the entire collection activities, videos and visualizations. Do you think another button that would say by NGSS standards would help?
Yeah, but when you click on that, it would have to then take you to like where you could click on the standard that you're looking.
Standard, yeah.
But yeah, I think
Since
that
everything is tagged that way, that's not, I mean, yes, setting up the structure to do that is a little bit of work, but the resources themselves are already tagged with everything so that if the structure is set up to do that. So right now you can go and click on activities and get all the list of activities. So you could click on a button that says standards, and then the list of standards come up, and then you'd have to then pick a standard.
The
Yeah.
simpler the better, because teachers just simply do not have the time.
Okay.
They will have a span of a few seconds, and if they can't find something right away, generally they move on to the next thing that will.
And so I like, Tamara, your idea of saying by NGSS, because if you say by standards, they're not going to know which ones those, like just call out specifically by NGSS, because those are the most universal for sure.
If I could
Yeah,
ask a question a little bit.
go for it, Jim.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if there's others that have this fortune, because you know we have a whole range of how schools and districts are teaching climate change and dealing with it. In one of the main schools that I teach in, we have the luxury of we're now teaching an entire year of climate education, 2 semester courses, 5 days a week. Students are going in depth. They are learning careers. They are working. They're doing field trips. They're doing, we're going in depth. And so the way in which we're using CLEAN primarily now isn't, so when the majority of the material they're getting isn't that we have selected for them. The students are given time that here's a project. Each of you go out and find something in CLEAN and study it, and then report back on it and look at it, and not just a little book report type of thing, really go in depth. So students are getting to choose what parts of CLEAN interest them, right? That's the nice thing about climate change. It's so rich. It's so thing. You don't have to know everything about climate change. I don't know. There's no one on the planet who knows everything that's in CLEAN. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but there is nobody on the planet who knows every piece of information that's in CLEAN. They may not know, they may know it exists, they may study it, may look at it, but they're so rich. Climate change is a good thing, but to have students be able to electively go in and make selections of it, CLEAN is a magnificent resource. This is one of our favorites. Are there others that have that? You know, that where the students are making choices over what they want to study. And a lot of times it has to align with where they want to go with their careers. They're already exploring being a biologist, to being an engineer, to be an entrepreneur. They're already exploring that. They're looking into it. So they're looking at what can help them do that, who they can link up with. Anyone else? Is that going on? That's a plug for you, Patrick. CLEAN's popular.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we do see that there's usability challenges, and it makes a lot of sense that there is, given how things were built and how they've evolved over the past 15 years. You know, this website was built at a time where templates weren't as available, so it was put together piece by piece. So the layering of it does make it difficult. I want to show one other thing, and thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. And CLEAN definitely is getting used, but I wanted to throw this up here too. And again, I think the problem is this is not necessarily a place that people know about, but I can go to NGSS and choose an arena and choose CLEAN resources that align with any standard. I think this is what y'all were asking for, but it's not necessarily a place that folks know where to find. And I think that layering is challenging. But is this basically what you were hoping to see, Rachel and Danelle?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely closer. That's pretty much what I was looking for. But like you said, it's not easy to find. It seems kind of hidden. It takes several clicks to get there.
Yeah, and you also have to know how to navigate it. So,
right? Because when you first open the site, even just educational resources, it doesn't expand at first. And so you
Yeah.
don't really know that, oh, there's, I don't know. It's a learning
It's-
process.
it's a really challenging thing because it's not easy to navigate necessarily.
Yeah, and again, we've just had some consulting on website design, and every click is like a loss, like it is tricky, but that is closer. Even if you just switched so that you had that option on that landing page to go to that would be useful while you're figuring out what may or may not work better than that. But the NGSS at a glance, that one would more teachers, I think, would find what they're looking for that way.
Sure, we can highlight that. It's interesting, the space of climate education is always changing. And right now it's in a space where the teaching across the curriculum space is expanding pretty rapidly. So that's definitely moving beyond NGSS. And I think that connects to the NCA5 work, because if you're really digging into a National Climate Assessment chapter, you're going to need more disciplines than science and NGSS to address the problems listed. Really will need to include the humanities as well, and social science, in addition to communication and political engagement skills. So it's a really interesting space that's changing quite a bit. And also, I hear you that NGSS is still a go-to, and highlighting it front and center might help us to simplify things for teachers who wanted to jump in. And that's an easy fix. So I can check in with our team about that. Because the link that I put in the chat, it's pretty well put together and simple. You just click on it, click on the standard, there's all the clean resources.
Yeah, I will just add, I think the elementary section would be better if it was organized by grade level instead of by subject area. Middle school and high school, of course, people shift those around between different courses or grade levels. But elementary school teachers generally are like specifically at a grade level, and they want to see their chunk. So that would just be my only bit of advice to change that NGSS at a glance site, is just that elementary section, like do it by kinder, first, second, third, fourth, fifth.
Sure.
Patrick, I wonder too, as this evolved, when I first encountered CLEAN, when first CLEAN just started, I was basically, the conversation I had was everything is toward digital media. Digital media is where it's at. That's where you need to reside. If you're trying to do things in person, you will never be at a big scale. You just don't, in-person education has gone out. It's going to be digital. I don't think that's what most people's point of view is now, and especially after COVID, we saw, wow, you go that direction, that's really going to turn off students. So one of the things I would bring up is, can we all resolve to work together on CLEAN having ambassadors, people who are out in the public or in person? I would love to have more people who are like me, who are in schools all the time, right? I teach in schools. I teach in museums. I teach in the public. I teach with other educators, like some of the ones you see in the pictures behind me. And then we're invited into schools all over districts. So then we get to have conversations with what the other teachers are teaching and how they are approaching climate change. And one of the big subjects is climate change, how climate change has been framed in schools to be an absolutely dull subject that nobody wants to teach. Plus, it's a subject that you don't want to teach because you're going to get controversy, and controversy is the district doesn't want. And I'm just saying, I'm saying that because that's the truth of what we're hearing. I'm not saying that's the truth of what the reality is. I think CLEAN can be an exciting resource. It has exciting resources, but we have to be out there pushing for it and doing it. In Montgomery County, one of the areas that we're based in, right? I talked in depth with teachers in Montgomery County of how is climate change most taught in the schools? Even though NGSS, you can even start in kindergarten in DC. And climate change science can start in kindergarten by DC standards, but instead it's basically all put into the 6th grade, and it's under climate and weather. okay? And it's structured in such a way that you have to go through like weeks and weeks and weeks about all the details of weather. And then you finally get to what is climate. And most teachers never even get to climate change. And I've talked to the teachers and they say of all the science subjects we teach in the entire school from K to 12, that is the part of that's a marking period that we all hate. It is so boring. It is so dreary. I think there are people who are trying to make it dreary, but we need to be out there being clear. This is not dreary stuff. This is really exciting, but we can't do it just from a website. Anyway, people might disagree with me, but that's my feeling.
Well, one thing I do want to push back about, Jim, is talking in absolutes about what it is and how it appears, because I think that in our teaching across the curriculum research and some of the projects that we've been doing, looking at what climate is nationally, it's not really anything nationally. It's not really anything at many levels, because local control dictates so much of how it appears, what support's available, and how it's taught. So what you're describing is definitely a case, and I'm like, I honor that and I see that. But with New Jersey passing climate change standards in all grades and all subjects, it looks very different in New Jersey. It doesn't mean it looks great in every place in New Jersey. It just looks different. And it looks different in each district. It looks different in schools in those districts. And that's the case across Colorado. It's the case across Washington. It's the case across many places in the United States. There is no, this is climate change in the United States that's happening. It's a mosaic of different systems. And that makes it uniquely challenging to try and have something like CLEAN that offers resources that hope to be a good fit across that system. Which I think the National Climate Assessment Educator's Guide helps get to, because it's more regional. But it's a really interesting landscape out there. And to address your other point, Jim, we are working on expanding our ambassador program, and that's actively being done. We've already have a couple dozen ambassadors that are doing work around the country for us. And what we're hoping to do is address that mosaic landscape by working more at the district and regional level, and working with the district leaders to ask what's going on with your curriculum. How can we provide a training for you that you can then give to teachers? Because what's not working is working at a state level. It's a really interesting place, but we are working on expanding that ambassador program and helping ambassadors work on the curriculum level.
Patrick, if I might, right to your point, first off, I will speak to the places that I know best, the places that I speak of. I cannot speak particularly authoritatively about any place in Colorado or Washington State or Nebraska or Arizona, but I can speak to Maryland, I can speak to DC, Virginia, and absolutely the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, districts, these are districts that I teach in, that are my colleagues teach in, that have long had policy that climate change should be taught. So we get in-depth discussion with the districts about what's teaching. And one of my questions is always, who are your leaders? Who are our leaders? Which teachers are teaching it? And generally the districts have no answer. They cannot speak to, there's a teacher that they stand out as doing teaching, which I think is outrageous. And I have to come to them and say, well, how about this teacher? We know them. And in the picture behind me now, this is an event for the city of Fremont, one such district. And we're teaching to the entire district essentially at this climate change Earth Day event. And outside, I'm talking to the head of the district on climate change. And he can't name any teachers that are teaching climate change. And we're teaching to them. I mean, it's such a disconnect the districts are doing. The idea is, if we're not out there actually engaging and talking with teachers, bringing them resources, then we're missing opportunities. I can speak to how effective it is because my small group of volunteer and young professional educators, we are extremely effective. We're teaching in hundreds of schools. We're just a small bunch. I don't say that. I say that because, yeah, that's not to scale. But Jesus, when are we trying for excellence instead of milk toast?
Hmm.
Okay,
Always,
so
I think, Jim.
okay, well that's good. But I mean, no, I'm not trying to say I know what's happening in New York even to any depth, but I sure as hell can tell you what's going on in the Bay Area and in DC. And I don't mean to say that, but you can't find anybody else who knows more than us because we are doing it.
I appreciate all that, Jim, and I appreciate your passion and your work for sure. It is a really interesting landscape across the US. And I am curious. We've had a lot of folks in the call who've been with us to think about the National Climate Assessment Guide, the NGSS visibility, the scale of climate education, and how best to reach folks. We've got a lot of topics on the table, but I want to create a little space for anybody who'd like to jump into any one of those topics of conversations. Um, well, let's hold that space for a minute. If you haven't jumped in and you'd like to, please do.
I mean, I guess kind of broadly related to that, some of you were at that meeting a while back for CLEAN where the climate fresque gal came in and talked about climate fresque out of France. I just want to say that I've become a facilitator and I've run a climate collage, a fresque for folks here at Catalyst Creative Collective where my office is, and I'm going to be running one for some folks in Pima County, but you should definitely check it out. It was very cool and a cool way to interact with the public and older students, like maybe 5th grade and up, using this climate collage model that they have. It's like really, really cool. So just another way to go about engaging more people in climate.
Awesome. Could you throw that link in the chat if you have it?
Anybody else want to share? Yolanda?
I'm Yolande. I can only second the climate fresque. It's very successful. It works with old people, young people, anybody. It is so well done and so engaging. And in 2 hours, you just achieve a lot. It has this domino effect of everybody wants to get engaged after that into climate justice, climate action, climate education. So just want to second that as a terrific tool.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, one thing I'll point out, I am a En-ROADS climate ambassador. So I use this model, En-ROADS, which is an energy rapid overview and decision support model. And I run this, but is to the point we've been talking about a little bit is that I ran this event last week, and it was a combination of community members and students, high school students. And usually I do these for either a middle school class or a high school class or a graduate class, a teacher professional development. So usually it's a homogeneous audience. But in this case, I had high school 9th graders to up through retirees. And it was a very, very rich conversation. So getting at that, it's just another avenue to engage people in the community in what's relevant to them, and a fun activity that involved across the generations was particularly rewarding.
Tamara, I keep meaning to get this training and I haven't yet, but for the En-ROADS, what is an ideal time-ish for doing that simulation?
How long?
Yeah.
So I've the way it's laid out, a workshop would be an hour and a half, and a simulation would be 3 hours. However, I have run the workshop can be run effectively in an hour and 10 minutes. And I've done it as short. It's not quite as interactive when you do it in less than an hour. I've done the simulation from anywhere from 2 hours to 3.5 hours. depending on the people involved and how engaged they become. So that it is very flexible.
What's
So
the difference when you're saying workshop versus simulation? What do you mean by that?
okay, so the workshop is an interactive event where people come and then you do divide them into 6 groups, but they're 6 equal kind of groups. A simulation is where the participants are divided into different sectors: conventional energy, clean tech, industry and commerce, agriculture and forestry, world governments, and climate justice hawks. And there can be more, but the 6 is usually what I do. And then they're given a briefing sheet, and they are then supposed to suggest solutions that not only get to the goal of keeping the temperatures no more than an increase of 2 degrees C by 2100, but also protect their sector. And it's through that process that students begin to see the difficulty in implementing these solutions, that different sectors have different priorities. And so it adds that element to it. So that's what I mean. Now, I've actually run these in my class, and what I've done is I run the workshop in one class, which is an hour and 20 minutes. And then in the next class, instead of running the simulation, I give each group, I have 6 groups, one of those briefing sheets. And I say, okay, you come up with a scenario that addresses, it gets to the goal and protects this sector. And then I have we compare what they come up with. And so then we address that issue of the social, economic, and cultural challenges of actually achieving those goals.
And what would you say workshop versus versus the simulation, like ideal like max size maybe? Or preferred?
Okay, I've done it anywhere from about 10 people to 100. I had 110 high school students in a simulation. Ideally, to get to assure that every participant gets full interaction, I would say on the order of 30 to 60. But you can adapt it for larger and smaller. It's just that some people will sit in those groups and say nothing. One of the things we did in the community group is I made the students the facilitators of the groups and the runners of the model, so that they had voices from the start. And I was astonished. Usually I have trouble pulling words out of the mouths of students, and these students had no trouble voicing what they thought and asking questions. So it was great.
Very cool. And I'm sorry, I think I've been saying your first name wrong. How do you say your first name again?
Tamara.
Okay, Tamara. Okay, it is right. Okay. Thanks. I have had that on my plate for a while, but busy doing other stuff. So it's good to hear yet another endorsement for it.
Yes. Any other thoughts? We're getting close to the top of the hour. Patrick, do you have any sense of how used the past educational supports for the national climate assessments have been?
I could pull up the analytics on it. I don't have those handy.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. Oh, Deb, hey.
Got it. Hi. No, thank you, Patrick and Tamara. I just want to say thank you again all for what you're doing. This is, I used to write about the environment, and I was thinking of different ways to get climate education out in different formats. And this group is one of the most informed.
I think partially because we're so diverse in our activities, and yet we have very common goals. And so we bring a lot of wisdom from everybody's efforts.
Well, and I think there's a lot of passion too from all corners of the country, which is nice.
I follow CLEAN Tech, and they were really into all sorts of things that were kind of debunked by information here. So I just passion, but also accurate. So thank you.
I think we can also add for the CLEAN network is that we have institutional memory. People have been here for a decade, 2 decades, 2.5 decades. One of the problems with nonprofits or a lot of education is people get a grant, people come in, and maybe they do it for 3 years and then they're gone. So there's a lot of times in things people only have 3 years of experience.
So for
Tamara,
those of the,
Tamara, you have an incredible knowledge of what history has been.
yes, so we started the CLEAN network in 2008 in Washington, D.C. in a Quiznos. We had just participated in the development of the climate literacy essential principles. The federal government had funded our meetings to actually develop those, but they couldn't advocate for their use. So that was 2008. And then by 2010, January of 2010, we got the CLEAN collection funding for the first time. And then we went live in November of 2010. And the telecons have been going every single week since 2008, minus Obama's inauguration and Christmas and New Year's. I think that's it. Obama's inauguration happened to be on a Tuesday, and we decided everybody wanted to watch that, so we did cancel that particular one. Yes, Janelle, I think we did meet in 2011.
Yeah, that's when I did my Einstein fellowship and then took
Right,
over
that's
the
right.
university stuff from Matthew Inman. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for this very interesting and lively conversation today. I appreciated it, and we'll see you next week.